This conference will now be recorded.
So we call it as clinically significant macular edema, and there are three criteria to define it as a clinical significant macular edema. What are the three criteria? The first one is retinal thickening within 500 microns of the center of the macula. Okay, so there should be a thickening of the retina within 500 microns from the center of the macula. The second criteria is hard exudates at or within 500 microns of the center of macula, and it must be associated with retinal thickening of the adjacent retina. If there is no thickening and only hard exudates are present, it does not satisfy the criteria. Okay, hard exudate should be present along with the retinal thickening. And retinal thickening, one disc area that is 500 microns or larger, any part which is within one disc diameter of the center of macula. Okay, so these three are the criteria to define clinically significant macular edema. Diabetic maculopathy is usually of four types. First one is a focal exudative maculopathy. The second one is a diffuse maculopathy. Third one is ischemic maculopathy, and fourth one is mixed maculopathy. Okay. So coming to focal exudative maculopathy, it is usually characterized by microaneurysms, hemorrhages, circumscribed macular edema, and hard exudates, which are usually arranged in succinate pattern. Okay, these hard exudates which are arranged in succinate pattern are called succinate retinopathy. Okay, these are also called as succinate retinopathy or succinate maculopathy. Okay, in this focal exudative maculopathy, in fluorescein angiography, we can see a focal leakage with adequate macular perfusion. Okay, so this is the focal macular exudative diabetic maculopathy. Okay, so this you can see the hard exudates are arranged in a succinate pattern. Okay, so this area is called the area of focal exudative maculopathy or succinate retinopathy. Okay, so this is this is seen in FFA. Here you can see there is a focal accumulation of exudates. Okay, this hyperfluorescence is exudates. Coming to diffuse exudative maculopathy, it is characterized by diffuse retinal edema and thickening throughout the posterior pole with relatively few hard exudates. Fluorescein angiography reveals diffuse leakage at the posterior pole. So here you can see there is a diffuse retinal thickening here. Okay, the retinal thickening is seen all over it. Okay, and here you can see a significant cystoid macular edema. So here on FFA, you can see that there is a hyperfluorescence all over the retina, mainly in this region. Okay, this is the posterior pole, right? So mainly in this region. Then ischemic maculopathy. Ischemic maculopathy occurs due to microvascular blockage. Clinically, it is characterized by marked visual loss with microaneurysms, hemorrhages, and mild or no macular edema and few hard exudates. Fluorescein angiography in this area shows areas of non-perfusion, okay, which in early cases are in form of enlargement of foveal avascular zone. Okay, there is a zone called foveal avascular zone. That is usually in this area the perfusion is less. Okay, so this is called foveal avascular zone and it is present normally. But in ischemic maculopathy, this starts as a enlargement of foveal avascular zone, and later on areas of capillary dropouts are seen, and in advanced cases precapillary arterioles are blocked. Here see, this is the ischemic maculopathy. Okay, you cannot see hard exudates. Hard exudates are very few. Whatever you see are microaneurysms and these are hemorrhages. Okay, so in ischemic maculopathy, mainly microaneurysms and hemorrhages are characteristic, whereas in focal and diffuse maculopathy, hard exudates and retinal edema are characteristic. Okay, so here you can see there is a non-perfusion here. Okay, normally this is the foveal avascular zone. Okay, this circle. but in this there is a enlargement of foveal avascular zone. Okay, these are the capillary non-perfusion areas. Due to ischemia, these areas are not getting blood. Okay, and then mixed maculopathy. Mixed maculopathy has combined features of ischemic and exudative maculopathies, that is focal, diffuse and ischemic. They all combine and gives rise to mixed maculopathy. This mixed maculopathy, diffuse, focal and ischemic maculopathy, these are the clinical classification or classification by FFA. Now we are going to OCT classification. Okay, on OCT, this diabetic macular edema can be of two types. This can be non-tractional DME and tractional DME. Okay, what are the features of non-tractional DME? They are spongy thickness of macula, cystoid macular edema, and neurosensory detachment with or without spongy thickness of macula and cystoid macular edema. This non-tractional DME can again be divided into central involving with loss of foveal contour and non-central involving with thickening within 300 microns of center of macula, but it does not involve the center. Okay. So this is the center involving DME seen on OCT. This is the fovea. Okay. So the center of the fovea is involved and the foveal contour is lost. Okay. Here there must be a foveal contour, but it is lost due to central involving diabetic macular edema. And this is a non-center involving diabetic macular edema. Here you can see the foveal contour is maintained. Okay. This is the foveal contour which is maintained. And the edema is present here, somewhere around 3000 microns away from the fovea. Okay, so this is the non-center involving diabetic macular edema. Then coming to tractional DME, it may be of following types: vitreofoveal traction and taut or thickened posterior hyaloid membrane. So here you can see vitreous traction. Okay. Why do the vitreous traction occurs? This occurs due to proliferation. Okay, in severe cases of diabetes, there is a proliferative detachment. Okay, due to this proliferation, the vitreous is pulled. Okay, and this vitreous further pulls the fovea, causing tractional DME. Okay, so this is the vitreous traction, and these are the intraretinal cysts caused due to detachment, and if it further the traction increases, it can also lead to retinal detachment. Okay, this is the edema and it is the detachment, retinal detachment. So coming to medical treatment of diabetic macular edema, we should first control the systemic risk factors like smoking, hypertension, cholesterol, hypercholesterolemia, etc. And pharmacologically, modifications can be done by anti-VEGFs, intravitreal steroids, and laser therapy. Intravitreal anti-VEGFs, vascular endothelial growth factor, plays a pivotal role in so bevacizumab and ranibizumab, when given greater than 40% cases, and stabilizes vision in another 40% of cases. Okay. So these intravitreal anti-VEGFs, these are preferred over laser therapy, particularly in patients with focal cystoid macular edema involving the center of fovea, diffuse diabetic macular edema, diabetic cystoid macular edema, and diabetic macular edema with neurosensory detachment. Anti-VEGFs are also recommended before panretinal photocoagulation in patients with proliferative diabetic retinopathy and diffuse diabetic macular edema. What are the disadvantages? The disadvantages are the effect of anti-VEGFs usually lasts for 4 to 6 weeks and frequent injections are warranted. And because of the frequent injections, the patient is on a risk for endophthalmitis, and also there is a cost factor. Okay, these injections are very costly. Usually the starting injection is from 14,000. Okay, and the highest is up to 50,000. Coming to intravitreal steroids, intravitreal triamcinolone acetonide is used as it restores the inner retinal barrier and has some anti-VEGF effects as well. The disadvantages of using steroids are there is a risk of glaucoma, there is a risk of steroid-induced cataract, there is an increased vulnerability to endophthalmitis. Hence, anti-VEGFs are preferred over intravitreal triamcinolone. However, in recalcitrant cases, intravitreal triamcinolone can be given along with the anti-VEGFs. Laser therapy. ETDRS has recommended focal laser for focal DME and grid laser for diffuse DME. Laser helps possibly by stimulating the RPE pump mechanism and by inhibiting VEGF release. Okay, here usually due to the increase in VEGFs, we are having increased exudates. Okay, so by stimulating the RPE pump mechanism, we can inhibit the VEGF release and we can inhibit the formation of exudates. Okay, laser therapy is performed using double frequency YAG laser, that is 532 nanometers, or argon green laser or diode laser. So macular photocoagulation, it is of two types: focal photocoagulation for focal DME not involving the center of fovea, and grid photocoagulation. It is usually done for diffuse DME, but nowadays it is not a treatment of choice. It may be considered only for recalcitrant cases where the patient is not responding to anti-VEGFs and intravitreal steroids. And macular photocoagulation cannot be done in ischemic and tractional DME. Okay, so macular photocoagulation can be done only to focal and diffuse DME. Ischemic DME and tractional DME, the macular photocoagulation is contraindicated. It should not be done in ischemic and tractional DME. So this is the image showing focal macular photocoagulation. Okay, so this is the focal DME, and these are the laser dots around the focal DME, and this is the diffuse DME, and these are the grid laser photocoagulation around the diffuse DME. Okay, so this is the grid laser photocoagulation for diffuse DME, and this is the focal coagulation for focal DME. Coming to surgical treatment. Surgical treatment is usually necessary for tractional DME with non-proliferative diabetic retinopathy. The surgery of choice here is pars plana vitrectomy with removal of posterior hyaloid. Okay, because in here tractional DME, vitreous is the main culprit. Vitreous causes pressure or traction on the fovea and it drags it. Okay, so if there is no vitreous pressure on the fovea, then there will be no traction and there will be no DME or detachment. So here we should remove the vitreous so that the retina or fovea maintains its contour. Then next one is retinal degenerations. The first one is lattice degeneration. It is the most important degeneration associated with the retinal detachment. Incidence is, it is seen in 6 to 10% in general population and 15 to 20% in myopic patients. This means the myopic patients usually have more lattice degeneration, and mainly the myopic patient who are having high power, like from 4 to 8, the chances of retinal degeneration increases. Okay, so in patients having high myopia, we should do total peripheral retinal examination to rule out lattice degeneration, because this lattice degeneration can further lead to retinal detachment. Okay, it is a risk factor for retinal detachment. How does the lattice degeneration look like? It looks like a white arborizing lines arranged in a lattice pattern along with the areas of retinal thinning and abnormal pigmentation. Small round retinal holes are frequently present in the lattice degeneration. It is typically a spindle-shaped lesion. and it is located between ora serrata and the equator, with its long axis being circumferentially oriented. So ora serrata and equator means it is past the equator, that is anterior to the equator. So it is a peripheral lesion. Okay, we cannot see it uh, by doing a direct ophthalmoscopy. We should do indirect ophthalmoscopy so that peripheral retina is also visible. Okay, in indirect ophthalmoscopy we can have a wide view of a field. Okay, wide view of a field. So due to this wide view of field, we can also see peripheral retina, and this indirect ophthalmoscopy help us to rule out all other retinal degenerations, which are usually peripheral. Okay, it involves more frequently the temporal region than the nasal region, and the superior region than the inferior region. So by this, it is most frequently seen in superior and temporal area. Okay, so lattice degeneration most commonly seen in superior and temporal area. So this is what lattice degeneration look like. Okay, white lattice like pattern, crisscross pattern, okay, with abnormal pigmentation. Okay, this is whatever you see is the pigmentation, and it is usually seen in periphery, because see here the vessels are ending. Okay, so vessels are more in posterior pole, and they decrease as they come to periphery. Okay, so as here the vessels are less, this is the lesion seen in periphery. And the second one is snail track degeneration. It is more commonly like a lattice degeneration, but in lattice degeneration they are white lines, whereas snail track degeneration, the white lines are replaced by snowflake-like areas. Okay, here you can see these are not lines, but these are some powdery appearance, right? So snowflake-like appearance. Okay, it gives retina a white frost-like appearance. Okay, so you will see that this part of retina is frozen. You feel like this part of retina is frozen. Okay, so this is frost-like appearance. Okay, this is snail track degeneration. Then acquired retinoschisis. Usually the retinoschisis can be of two types. It can be congenital or acquired. Okay. So what is retinoschisis? The term retinoschisis refers to splitting of sensory retina into two layers at the level of inner nuclear and outer plexiform layer. Okay. So you should differentiate between retinal detachment and retinoschisis. Okay. Retinal detachment is a separation of neurosensory retina totally. The separation of neurosensory retina from the retinal pigment epithelium. Okay. Retinal pigment epithelium and neurosensory retina separates. That is called retinal detachment. Okay. And retinoschisis is the sensory retina is having 10 layers, right? So the split is between the two 5 layers. The outer 5 layers and inner 5 layers get separated. Okay, this is called retinoschisis. Okay, so retinal detachment and retinoschisis are different terms. You should not confuse between those. Okay, so acquired retinoschisis is also called as senile retinoschisis because it is usually present in old individuals. Rarely, it acts as a predisposing factor for primary retinal detachment. It is characterized by thin, transparent, immobile, shallow elevation of the inner retinal layers, which typically produces absolute field defects. The fact which helps in differentiating it from the shallow retinal detachment, which produces a relative scotoma. Okay, so what is absolute was what is relative? Absolute is it is present there, and relative is the patient just feels it is not present there. Okay, and this can be differentiated by increasing the light stimulus. Okay, by increasing the light stimulus, the relative scotoma, it goes off. Okay, it vanishes, whereas absolute field effects does not vanish with the increasing light stimulus. Okay, the condition is frequently bilateral, and it involves the lower temporal quadrants anterior to the equator. So here you can see it is acquired retinoschisis. Okay, smooth dome shaped like a shallow elevation in the retina. Okay, and this is the OCT scan. Here it is the acquired retinoschisis, and the split is between OPL and INL. Okay, this is the outer plexiform layer, and this is the inner nuclear layer, and the split is between here. Okay, if it is retinal detachment, the split will be here. Okay, this is the retinal pigment epithelium, and this all is the neurosensory retina. So if it is a retinal detachment, the split will be here. This bright layer is choriocapillaris layer. Okay, the layer where there is blood vessels. Okay, so the split will be between these two layers. In acquired retinoschisis, the split is between OPL and INL layer. Then there are terms called white with pressure and white without pressure. These are uncommon degenerations, and these can be associated with retinal detachment. White with pressure lesions are characterized by grayish translucent appearance of retina seen on scleral indentation. What is scleral indentation? It is nothing but we put pressure on the opposite sclera, okay, so that the sclera indents and we can see the periphery of the retina easily. Okay, these are all the peripheral retinal degeneration. That's why we should use the scleral indentation to see them. And there is a lesion called white without pressure. These lesions are located in the peripheral retina and may be associated with lattice degeneration. Okay, so this is the area, this is the white with pressure. Okay, and this is white without pressure. Okay, these are the peripheral retinal degenerations. This is the posterior pole, right? But this is the periphery, this is ora serrata. Okay, so these are mostly seen in periphery of the retina. Then focal pigment clumps. These are small localized areas of irregular pigmentation usually seen in the equatorial region. This may be associated with posterior vitreous detachment and sometimes can be associated with retinal tear. These are the focal clumps. Okay, focal pigment clumps usually seen in equatorial area. Okay, so this is the posterior pole and this is the equator. Mostly seen in equatorial region, and they can be associated with PVD and retinal tear. Then diffuse chororetinal degeneration. It is characterized by diffuse areas of retinal thinning and depigmentation of the underlying choroid. Okay, here you can see there is a diffuse area of retinal thinning. So this is the normal area, but here is the area where there is a retinal thinning. Due to thinning of retina, we can see the underlying sclera. Okay, this white whatever you see is the underlying sclera due to thinning of retina. Okay, and the pigment, there is somewhat depigmentation. Okay, this depigmentation is due to choroid. Okay, so retinal thinning along with the depigmentation of underlying choroid. This is diffuse chorioretinal degeneration. It commonly involves equatorial region of highly myopic eyes. In normal eyes, it can involve whole of the retina, whereas in myopic eyes, it usually involves the equatorial region because of the increased axial length. Okay, as the axial length of the eyeball increases in the myopic eyes, there will be a stretching on retina and choroid. Okay, due to this stretching, there is a diffuse depigmentation of choroid along with the thinning of the retina. Then coming to peripheral cystoid retinal degeneration, it is a common degeneration seen in the eyes of old people. It may predispose to retinal detachment in some very old people. Okay, usually it is common in all people. Okay, all age old people. It is very common, like graying of hair. It is very common in old aged people, but in very few people this can cause retinal detachment, but the chances are very low. Okay, thank you. Do you have any doubts? Anyone has any doubts? Okay, diabetic macular edema is a very important question for you. It can be given as a 4 marks question. So you should know the definition of diabetic macular edema, definition of cystoid macular edema, clinical classification of types of macular edema, that is focal macular edema, diffuse macular edema, ischemic macular edema, and mixed. And OCT classification, that is non-tractional DME and tractional DME. And coming to medical treatment, we are anti-VEGFs, anti-steroids, and laser therapy. And coming to surgical treatment, it is pars plana vitrectomy along with posterior hyaloid detachment. Okay, so these are the main points you should you should write in diabetic macular edema. And retinal degenerations, usually they can be asked each for 2 marks. Lattice degeneration and acquired retinoschisis are important degenerations which can be asked for 2 marks. So you should be thorough with them. And white without pressure and white with pressure can also be asked as a 2 marks question. Okay. Anyone having any doubts? Can someone respond, please?
No doubt.
Okay, everyone is clear?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.